Hello, fortune seekers. Art. Without it, your game may as well be a spreadsheet. Gross. In the past, we have spoken about the process of using Midjourney to create AI art pieces for our prototypes. Now that we are moving into final designs, we have started to work with flesh and blood human people to make our imaginary world come to life. We are going to tell you our process for finding talented artists, onboarding them, and working with them to make the best art a game can ask for. All that and so much more on this episode of the Moth Studios Super Secret Podcast. Shh! Don't tell anyone about it. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Shark to both card tables and thrift store clearance racks, Joel Watts. Joined as always by...
Danny. Always interested to see how you'll describe yourself.
Yeah, well, I have many facets to my personality.
I can attest to that.
Last week, we had on Ben Mertz from Affect Games for Good, and we heard all about his journey in helping his community through board games and sharing board game and board game design with the people.
You got a little
Chicago.
spicy with him about coffee preparation, too.
Yes, that is true. He also we had a little bit of a debate about how to prepare espresso. So if you want to hear that and so much more about board gaming in Chicago, why don't you go back 1 week in your podcast app and listen to last week's episode. But on today's episode, we're going to be discussing our experience working with artists, and that's to help guide you through the process for your own game or other creative project. But before we get into that, Danny, I got a question for you.
Oh, dear. What do we got this week?
So we got another question of the week from our Discord community. If you're not a member of our Discord, that's X Seekers of Fortune on Discord. We have a wonderful, vibrant community out there. And if you can find somebody on the Discord server to play our game with and teach you how to play the game. So we would highly recommend stopping by and getting a little taste of X Seekers of Fortune. But there's also a lot of talk about cinema, about movies. And Rickman33 asks this week, what movie do you like that is generally unpopular or disliked by most other people?
Okay, Rickman coming in hot with yet another question. Gotta love it. It is nice to have somebody out here asking questions that are not questions you come up with, Joel.
Oh, yeah. I'm out. I have no more questions to ask you, Danny. I think I might be done. So you better continue to ask questions in the Discord. Otherwise, we're just going to sit here blankly for 5 minutes next week.
All right. So the question is, what is bad that people don't like that I like? Okay, I think I have an answer to this. And it's got some wonderful bona fides on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 11% critic score and a 16% fan score.
Oh, so they're in alignment. This is a true stinker. I hit me with it, Danny. What is this one?
Joel Schumacher's Magnus Opus, Batman and Robin.
Oh, okay. I have to ask, when was the last time you watched Batman and Robin?
I was probably 12.
Okay. Probably one of those cinema moments to keep in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the only way I'm going to get an answer to this question. But I have to say I enjoyed Mr. Freeze's, Arnold's Mr. Freeze and Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy. I wasn't super fan of Chris O'Donnell or Alicia Silverstone, but George Clooney, nipples on a bat suit, hard to complain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're at that age, kind of discovering things about yourself for sure. But I mean, like the villains always had a wonderful time. Like you got to just be a campy mess and somehow get away with it. Like it was especially the Joel Schumacher Batmans. It was like carte blanche to go too far. Potentially career ruining performances in any other films, and yet you could go all out, especially Jim Carrey as the Riddler. If you will, look back at that, you understand why,
Well, that's
Tommy
Batman Forever.
Well, I understand, yeah, but it's also Joel Schumacher, and it's like,
yeah, that's fair.
It's also like a truly outrageous, like...
How did they go Tim Burton to Joel Schumacher, by the way?
I mean, Joel Schumacher was just a steady hand of Hollywood at that point, I can't say for sure. That would be a really good question. If somebody were to talk about the development of Batman Forever and like, you know, from Tim Burton to Joel Schumacher, like how the movie changed, I would watch that video essay for sure. I'm going to look for it after the show's done.
We might need to watch Batman and Robin and do a little commentary.
I think we could. I think we could either commentate it or just recap it, you know, and talk about all the ridiculousness. I just remember that Batman, early into the film, Robin gets completely frozen and Batman has to, like, melt him somehow. So
I just remember, like, a lot of people on, like, motorcycles and, like, ice skates and a lot of pageantry. I mean, I think it would have worked a lot better as a live musical on Broadway.
Oh, yeah. Ice show, if you will.
Oh, Batman and Robin on ice. How is that not a thing?
Yeah. I'm sure somebody's attempted at least once. But I would go see that in a heartbeat, a touring show like that, especially because, like, yeah, you got it built in. Mr. Freeze is the perfect villain to do Batman on ice. You got
how much would we have to raise on the Kickstarter for you to write, direct, and star in Batman and Robin on ice with you playing Batman, Robin, and Mr. Freeze?
So we're going to we have to film it. I'm assuming, unless I'm doing costume changes and those characters don't appear on stage at the same time.
We'd have like a very special costume that could just kind of be all three.
I could just turn. So you're also asking me to have to learn how to ice skate.
Well,
as a Texan, it's not been a priority to learn.
You've never ice skated before?
No, actually, I don't think I've ever once put on ice skates and gotten on ice.
Will, we got to get.
Okay. I mean, hey, if our Kickstarter goes over $1 million. I mean, we can make something happen, I'm sure. We can make anything happen if it goes over $1 million, right? That's like
I mean, you already are getting a face tattoo.
Well, I guess we can get my face tattooed to be Mr. Freeze, Batman,
yeah, I was going to say you
Robin.
should get a teardrop, but maybe a little snowflake.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, you know, if they had done Mr. Freeze in the that god-awful Suicide Squad movie, he would have a snowflake teardrop tattoo. That 100%, is, yeah, 100%. Mr. Freeze is just in general. I'm a big fan of the Batman animated TV show. If anything,
100%.
That's my canonical Batman. I will even have the stinker answer. If somebody asks me my favorite Batman movie, I'll say Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I think, you know, a lot of people would consider that a cop out, but Mr. Freeze has yet to be done since Arnold Schwarzenegger in live action, and you want my butt in the seat day one of a Batman movie, please do a Mr. Freeze one. And I think
with Patrick Stewart, I mean, back in the day, at least he would have been perfect. I think he could still maybe make it work because he's pretty spry.
They also Patrick Stewart and who was the other one? I mean, all the Hollywood Baldmen are like on deck for it. What was his name? Ben
Kingsley?
Kingsley, yes. Yeah.
Ben Kingsley could have done a good job. I think you kind of want someone like tall and slender. But anyway, what is your answer to this question?
Okay, I had to eject from my last answer right before we started because I found out people actually liked the movie. I just happened to listen to a couple of jerks. It was Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. And I listened to a podcast at the time. This actually turned my, like, sometimes a podcast will voice an opinion and it's just like, well, if you have that opinion, we can't be friends anymore. And they stunk up on this movie, and I think maybe they just went to a bad showing or they weren't in the mood for it. But Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl is like a movie that I saw twice in theaters at Violet Crown. One time I didn't even know what I was going in for. And I started crying about 30 minutes before the movie ended. There's a scene that it started.
You say before it started.
No, before it ended. Before it ended, like 30 minutes there was basically 30 minutes of Joel nasty crying.
What is nasty crying? What's Joel nasty crying looking like?
Dude, I can't even, like, I have to be there to get it. Like, that's probably why I wouldn't make a great actor is I can't.
How much would we have to earn on the Kickstarter for you to nasty cry on cue?
To learn to do it on cue, I'll say I'll do the theater school thing where it's like I can't leave the stage until I cry, and you can keep a camera on me the entire time, and I can figure it out.
With 400 cats,
we can't do 400 cat standing. We already asked ChatGPT about the 400 cat questions, and it would do irreparable damage to their psychology if we put 400 cats in a small space together.
I still feel like it would make a hell of a live stream. Tell me you're not clicking on a video that says, I live streamed for 24 hours in a closed room with 400 cats.
That better be that closed room would better be a warehouse. Oh, my God.
I was in your office.
Anyway, so I revised my answer because that movie is actually considered good, and I agree, it is a good movie. Check it out if you haven't, especially if you're a young man and you want to cry. I think it might just play that flute perfectly. Now, the movie I actually brought into TV shows because when I had to eject that answer, I was like, I scrambled and I checked a TV show that had one specific season that everybody decided to just pile on. And I actually kind of dug, which was True Detective Season 2.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, have you seen True Detective Season 1?
I have.
Okay, True Detective Season 2 is a little, like, just slightly cuckoo bananas in comparison to Season 1. And Season 1 had some pretty wild stuff in it. I would say it didn't have the same... Instead of having one off-the-wall character that clashed against everybody's mostly normalcy... This one was more like every character was a little bit off in their own way. And I think sometimes when people dogpile on something one way or the other, I just am a natural contrarian, so I will take the opposite opinion. But people were calling this a train wreck. And brother, let me tell you something. I've watched some train wrecks of movies and TV shows.
I thought you were going to say actual train wrecks.
Haven't had the pleasure quite yet. Someday.
Oh God, their little Genghis Khan coming out there.
But I've seen some train wrecks. Let me tell you, True Detective Season 2, was it a step down? Yes, it's not the masterpiece Season 1 is. But what is? True Detective Season 1 is like a lightning in a bottle situation. True 100%. Detective Season 2 was still a pretty steady show, navigated quite well. And Vince Vaughn has some amazing lines, like the writer just getting to take an actor's mouth and make it, like a puppet, make it say whatever he wants. It was, it's definitely a writer's season of TV. And I think it has, near the end, it has two of the best death scenes that I've seen, not to give too much away. And Rachel, as I believe it was Rachel McAdams, plays one of the detectives in that one, because the conceit is like... Regina George from Mean Girls.
Correct.
Well, I didn't see her wearing any pink in that, in that episode or any of the episodes. She was definitely a different kind of mean girl, the kind of mean girl who steals my heart.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is,
you have a
something
type.
I need to work on it. So, anyway, suffice to say, go watch a clip. If there's like a clip compilation on YouTube of Vince Vaughn's best lines or the most off-the-wall lines said in that season, you should watch it because it is fun for that reason. But it also there was some great tension, great action. If it had been named anything else, people would have been like, that was a solid TV show, like TV cop show. It's like, it's not quite a procedural. It's outside of that realm. But I think it did change a little too much. Like, I think we really wanted to have like that occult vibe, throughout True Detective. That should have been like something that it kept. And it was more like the cult of capitalism, I guess, instead of the cult of, like voodoo magic. And maybe that's one of the reasons. There's many reasons people might see it and be like, man, this stinks. But what? Sometimes
True Detective Season 1, Matthew McConaughey decided to just show the entire world that he was just like one of the very best actors in Hollywood.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's just like, oh, you guys want to see something?
Yo,
check this out. I mean, could easily be my favorite performance in anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthew McConaughey in that movie, he just kind of cracks your head open, you know?
Yeah, it was revelatory. It was like he acted so well in that. And I know he's done some acting since, but it's like I feel like the Oscars were like, well, I guess we got to give it to Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club because we can't nominate a TV show. Yeah,
that's exactly how it felt.
But yeah, it's like if you get the option and you haven't seen True Detective Season 1, maybe watch Season 2 first to be the warm-up into Season 1.
What about Season 3? Is that any good?
I haven't watched it. I plan on watching at some point. In fact, I went through a long dry spell of watching TV and movies, and just recently I watched, I'm trying to keep up with Blank Check. That's a podcast hosted by Griffin Newman and David Sims. And they're doing a David Fincher series. And I love David Fincher. So I was like, you know what? I'll watch 7. I haven't seen 7 in probably 15 years. And so I watched it.
What's your favorite David Fincher movie?
I think there's still a little stinker, rebel punk rocker who wants to say Fight Club. But I think in all honesty, like the movie that I could actually wrap up with like a warm blanket would probably be The Social Network.
Social Network is great.
Yeah, I think
Zodiac
he was
pretty
robbed.
good too.
I feel like I think Zodiac is a better film, but I don't. It's harder to sit down and watch.
Yeah,
It's
that
because
makes sense.
it's long.
I forgot about Social Network. It's
Social
good.
Network is like that was that was one of my when it comes to it was robbed by the Oscars. The Social Network is probably my biggest it was robbed answer. But no, I think that's a pretty good answer, and it goes to show there are many opinions about these things out there. You don't have to align with the masses in the mainstream. Go and find something weird that speaks to you, and stick with it and defend it, and just be a contrarian from time to time. Opinions are awesome. Have your own. Well, now that we're now that we're done with the question of the week, and that was like way more involved than I thought it was going to be. Let's get into today's main topic, and what we want to talk about today is art. Getting in and working. Well, let me zip back a little bit. What we want to talk to you about today is our experience so far of working with artists to make art for our game, and some of the things that we've learned, and some of the parts of the processes that we've gone through. So, Danny, I got a question. Why should we work with artists?
It's super fun. I mean, we've had a long journey. I would say. I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into this. We've talked about our journey with AI art and concepting quite a bit on the podcast. So, I mean, I don't think we'll go too deep here. But working with artists is a very different experience. One thing, they know what hands are. Right?
Yes. Only 10, unless you ask them to, take a few off.
But the other thing is like it's actual collaboration. Like AI, you're gonna like tell it to do something, and it's gonna do something weird, and you're gonna keep doing that until it gets something that you're like, oh, pretty cool. And look, we've figured out how to use AI in our process that we think is beneficial, and we'll talk about that maybe more later. But there's something really magical about being able to sit down with an artist and talk through something, and you get something back, and you can actually give very specific feedback and notes, and they can push back and say, no, I don't think so. Like the whole process is so much better person to person.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I completely agree. And, I did want to pose this question because a lot of people are thinking AI, Midjourney specifically, I think is the most popular, or at least the easiest to access at this point. I'm not sure about Dolly and what was do you remember the name of the other one?
Stable Diffusion, I think.
Yeah, Stable Diffusion. I'm not sure what the process is to get in on those, but I mean, Midjourney is the one that seems to be the consumer level. And yes, it can produce really good things really quickly, but there's some things that it just can't do, or at the very least, I think you'd have to jump through too many like hoops. Like we noticed when we were making it, it's like if you wanted to depict one person, a very specific person, it was fine. But if you wanted to try to get two people and have them look specific, like characters that are consistent with the design of a character, that's when it got a bit nutty. And there was just very specific compensations.
I don't know what you're gonna say, so it's hard for me to say.
How a frame is composed.
Compositions.
There was very specific compositions that we wanted to make for the game.
You still stuck the pen in there.
I don't know what is going wrong with me today, but basically there was very specific scenes that we wanted to depict that I think because you did most of the prompting with the AI with Midjourney, and I think for you to get it, you would have had to like really bang your head against the computer screen and like smashed your keyboard a few times to actually get what we had in our head, and we often had to settle.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see AI tools capable of doing this sort of thing better in the future. It'll be much more user friendly. But before we get there, there's going to have to be some of the ethical and legal considerations worked out for, again, if you're doing a small game, we talk about this all the time. If you're doing a small game, you're not really looking to commercialize it. I think it's fine to use AI art. It's just like using public domain fonts or anything else. It's like, if you're not going to make money off of it, that's okay. But the moment that you're trying to do a large commercial project, you really owe it to the people who made that possible to compensate them. And since there's not a really clean way of doing that now, or any way that I'm aware of, for us, we felt, working with artists amongst everything else was the right decision for us. And as we've kind of pointed out, like, there's a ton of benefits to working with artists. Obviously, it costs money, and so that's prohibitive. But my thing is, if you believe in your game and you think your game is good enough, you can go to Kickstarter, you can go to investors, and if they see your game and they play it, they'll give you the money needed to get it to be the version that it will need to be to go to market. Again, no one's telling you to spend this money if you don't have a chance of getting a return on it. But to try to launch and do a massive commercial thing and say, we'll pay them, when we're successful. I mean, that's a path people can take, but I mean, I think sometimes you have to bet on yourself and, put the money where your mouth is.
Exactly. And also, I would say, like, if you're thinking about going the Kickstarter route or the investors route, a little bit of art can go a long way in selling a vision. We often showed even when we had the Midjourney art, we kind of really honed in on like 2 or 3 images that we constantly put forward because they were our favorites and they really told the story. If you were to get 2 or 3 artists to produce maybe 1 or 2 pieces each, that would at least give you a sizzle reel of sorts, a lookbook of like, this is what the game is going to look like. Now, I would also say to answer my own question, artists are awesome and they make society and life better. So shouldn't they be compensated? Shouldn't they have an outlet to, earn a living so they can keep doing that and keep being awesome? I mean, we've been working with artists for a few months now, and it can take them hours, days of work to produce one high quality image. I mean, I feel like that is worth that's worth compensation. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and they deserve to get that. And a computer, as people have often said, is Midjourney is essentially, it is taking art from other people and remixing it all together, and that's the ethical line that we've been talking about, is that you can't, these pieces, these are artists' intellectual property, and they're trying to, and
it's not that the pieces
yes.
Midjourney is creating is artists' intellectual property. It's that it wouldn't be possible without pilfering artists' intellectual property.
Exactly. And it's just, it is standing on the shoulders of giants, but, it is also not going to, not specifically, but for the most part, it's not going to show you something new. It's going to show you a remix of something that's come before. And the art that we're getting from our artists, we do feel like is new looks and has very specific stories it's telling amongst multiple elements.
That's been the coolest part for me. I mean, we created, this game, and we're working on the companion story right now. And if we could have gotten, the game has three different Action X cards, right? Sites, relics, feats. And we now have 2 feats that are set at a site where it is one of the characters that is central to the story utilizing one of the relics in the story. And we could never have done that with Midjourney or AI art. So getting an opportunity to really see the world come alive that we're building has been like, I don't know, I can't compare it to. It's just super, super fun. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's an artist, like basically, like you said, there's a artist who did one of our cards called Excavator's Pick, and he did the central like Excavator's Picks in the middle of the frame, and he designed the hell out of that card. That pick looks so cool. It has all these little intricate ruins, and it even has the detail that the head, the actual pickaxe head of it, looks as though it was broken at one point and had been re-smelted together. And that's actually part of the story that we wanted to include in the backstory of this pick and what makes it a magical, special item. And then we have another artist making a character holding on to the pickaxe, and when he sent in his final renders, it's like he said it was all said and basically it's done. like we actually saw the pickaxe from the first card in this card in a character's hand, and all those little details were included. He definitely was very true to the original designer's vision of what the pickaxe was going to look like, and we just knew it's like now this is a story. Now when a player takes the time to sift through all the art, they're going to be like, hey, wait, I recognize that, and it's here. And we're also going to have the pickaxe at least show up in one more card. So I'm looking forward to how that, sets in. It's going to be awesome. Well, this is great reasons to get an artist, to get real artists, people you can work with. How do you find these artists, Danny? I mean, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of going out and looking for these folks. What have been your methods?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways that I think work really well. I mean, one is something that a lot of us already do, which is doom scroll Instagram. You look for people who have cool art on Instagram, but a lot of artists don't really want to be solicited for commissions via Instagram because, has anyone ever looked at that Reddit begging choosers, or you know what I'm talking about, Joel? The one
Yeah, I
where
do.
it's just people trying to get other people to give them things for free.
Yes.
And most of those, like a good percentage of those are like people going to artists and being like, hey, I see you do $500 for a commission. I'll give you $5. And they'll be like, no, thank you. And they're like, come on, please.
Yeah.
I'll give you exposure. I'll show it to my friends."
Not just come on, please. They'll probably be like, come on, nasty word, just do it.
Yeah, exactly. So
Filthy language being thrown around at, perfectly innocent artist.
I know at least one of the artists that we work with will not take commissions off Instagram for that reason. Or perhaps it's a different reason, but I assume it's that reason.
But Instagram would be, you would say, is a good place maybe to start to find the artist and then maybe dig into their account to discover where to go and discover more, right?
Yep. One of the greatest places that we've found artists has been ArtStation. If you Google ArtStation commissions, it'll bring up a whole list of different artists. They have different techniques and styles, and you can kind of just scroll through. And usually there's some contact information, and you can reach out to them and ask them about their process and commissions. And we'll talk a little bit more about when you reach out to artists, what you should say and do. But also conventions and art meetups are great. I mean, we've met at least one artist just walking the floors of Comic Palooza. And just networking, going by booths. If you see something you like, ask them if they do commissions. And then, the last thing I would say is ask people in your network. If you know artists personally, or people who make art, if you know other game designers. I mean, honestly, you could reach out to someone on social media. If you know a game designer, you like the art that they use in game, you could ask them. Or even one thing I've done is gone to the game store and just picked up boxes that caught my eye and looked who made it. There's groups on Facebook. There's just so many ways to find artists.
Yeah, no, you brought up a great point of being in network. I mean, one thing I really thoroughly believe in is, we should support our local communities as best as possible. And there's somebody, I'm not going to name names, but there is somebody in our sphere that I think is a great, amazing artist. And I'm just waiting, but they have a very specific style. So it's like we almost have to make the game for their art, or it has to be the right one. But yeah, look at, and maybe even let that inspire you. As we've said before, you should probably you be a little loose with your theme of your game, or at least one approach to making a game. You can start with the mechanics and then find the right theme to put on it. So maybe if you look around and see this art looks awesome, how can I bridge the gap between my game and that art? What theme would work, would blend those two together so that they can work together? It's just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were very intimidated, I think, finding artists when we started this process. But I think at this point we've found a good groove, and I feel like it's not something that there's no secret sauce. It's just kind of figuring out, where to go, where to look, who to talk to, and how to approach it. So yeah, I think a lot of artists out there.
Like most of the problems that we've had, or that we had to find solutions for, it usually comes down to spend time doing it, try to do it better each time that you go out to do it, and it'll eventually click.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely reciprocal. But before we jump into onboarding and interviewing, I do want to just point out the way you approach artists matter too. Sometimes you're going to approach them through their website and they'll have a form. Other times they'll have an email. But I think one of the things that's really important is, to let them know what it is that you're reaching out to them for, and hopefully give them something that they can look into. When we first started out, it was really just an email saying, we're making a game, X Seekers of Fortune. This is what the theme is. This is what the arts that we're looking to commission are and how many there are, and some basic questions just to start a dialogue and invite them to a call. What's been cool later in the process, some of the last couple of artists that we've talked to, when I sent them the email, because now you can Google the game, they come back and they say, hey, I checked out the game. This looks really cool. I want to be part of it. So it's kind of neat. When we first started, it was just, hey, we're doing something. You want to be part of it. And, if they like what they heard or what we could show them behind the scenes, they jump on. But now people can, since there's materials out in the world they can look at, they can kind of psych themselves up before we even get on the call. But
and maybe, and maybe to go back to like where we're saying where the concept art of AI concept art, where a good place to get you to is like, showing artists, this is the style, these are the subject matters that we want. Does this appeal to you? And that, so that can give them a taste of like, oh, I think these guys will vibe with my style, or, oh, this might seem outside of my purview.
100%. I think we can go a little deeper on that even later in the conversation. But what has been your experience so far with the interviewing? What would you say has kind of been your approach to interviewing artists?
I would say that in the few interviews that we've had, I like to just get a sense of how to the point they are, how professional they are. And it's not a mark against them either way. If they're super professional and it's just all business straight down the line, hey, that tells me this is, we'll sign the checks, we'll give you the briefs, and you'll do the work. And as long as the work gets done, that's the most important part. But it's also nice when you get a sense of their personality. And we just had a conversation with an artist that I think we actually had to get on track at a certain point, because we were just going off for like 30 minutes talking about a movie documentary, like one of those classic, this movie was a disaster and we actually made a documentary about it. It was about the island of Dr. Moreau. And that was,
I feel like we should have her on the podcast at one point to have that conversation.
I think so. She'd be a great, remember, this is potentially something that should be cut out because it is future talk about podcasts, but we actually had a movie recommended that's based on a game. I think it was a tie-in with a game. And it's like supposedly just the worst movie that one of the people in our community has ever seen. And I'm like, we should watch that movie and talk about it. But now that you mention it, based on the subject matter, I think she would really dig, doing that with us. So we should ask her about it. Do you remember seeing that post?
The Dante's Inferno post?
Yes, exactly.
Last night on Tuesday Night X, we pulled up the trailer and watched it. I streamed the trailer for the whoever was there at the time. And
yeah.
We watched it and kind of had a good chuckle afterwards. But yeah, if you're interested, join the Discord, go to the cinema chat thread, and I think LF1 made the post about it and his write-up of why the Dante's Inferno Xbox Live Direct.
If we do that episode, I will read his entire post as like the reason why we got into this.
Oh yeah, it's super cool.
But yeah, ultimately, I'm just making sure that that there's some spark there. It's like, would I be? And I think this is a little more important than artist relationship, especially because it's what is the term? They're not hired. They're not W-2 employees. They're
contractors.
Contractors. This is probably a little more important for a contracting situation. It's like you just want to make sure that in another world, if we met at a bar, would we get along decently? Could we potentially have a conversation that night? Could we be friends moving forward? I think that with art, you want to have that, because the thing that should be uniting you and the artist should be that similar taste, similar sensibilities.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of an opportunity for a mutual sniff test, right? They deserve to have an opportunity to interview us at the same time, and we really try to make the conversation not feel like an interview, but just an opportunity, to ask us questions, to see what we're like. But we're pretty committed to being the best clients we can be. One of the questions I like to ask during the interview process is, when you have a great client, how do they behave? what kind of feedback are they giving? How do they interact with you? And I think it's important, if you try to work the same way with every collaborator you have, you're just going to have some collaborators you can't work with because, your styles don't mesh with them. But if you're an adaptable person and you can kind of figure out how to be the best collaborator for the person you're collaborating with, while still representing your interests, you're going to have great results.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And yeah, that is actually a really great question to ask. What you can learn a lot about somebody based on the feedback that they enjoy getting. Because if they were to tell us, I think it might be oh, thanks but no thanks. If they were to say something like a great collaborator just signs the checks and accepts whatever I turn in, that would be a bad sign for us. But we haven't had anybody, everybody so far has been very receptive to this being a collaborative process and it being our vision as well as their vision for the final product. But if you get to the end of the artist conversation and everything's going good, there is something that you should be able to send them right away, and that is an artist agreement. And we have one of those locked and loaded, pretty much ready to go with a couple of a couple of things that we tweak per artist. Do you want to talk about what is in that agreement and why it's important?
Sure. So what we like to do is actually send the sample agreement to the artist before we even have that interview call so that can be part of the conversation. I think the last thing you want is to have a great hour-long conversation with someone and then you find out that there's something that's going to blow up everything in the agreement. It's much better to get that out on the front end to talk through it. But really, the agreement just specifies, what the artist is doing, how much they're going to get paid, when they're going to turn it in by. Depends on how granular you want to get, but you can agree to different milestones. But the most important things are that you are outlining the rights that you will be getting as the client, and what rights and protections the artist is going to retain, and just kind of going through all of the details. And I think, Joel, you'll agree that neither of us are in a position to offer any sort of legal advice. But I think it is absolutely. This is one place where, finding a little bit of, legal help just to do a quick, overview of your document will set you up on a good foot. One thing that we did, again, this isn't legal advice, this is just kind of how our approach is. We structured our artist agreement based on an agreement that was provided to us by an artist at some point. And the reason why we've done that is because we want to make sure that we have an artist-friendly agreement and something that is very standard. Typically speaking, I try to, stick to best practices where it makes sense to. If I find a best practice to be unequitable or inequitable, we will.
We're both having a time with words today, aren't we?
Yeah. I'll make adjustments so that I feel like, hey, this is what I think is fair. Because there are definitely times where agreements are very, very tilted against artists, and we don't want our artists. You're not doing yourself any favors if you're trying to have long-term relationships with people, putting them at some sort of disadvantage. Like that's a bad meme that businesses should be able to exploit artists. So anyway, that's just the basics. Again, not offering any legal advice, but just make sure you have a very clear expectation for what the deliverable is going to be, what formats it's going to be, what medium, what your rights are, what the payment is, and payment terms.
Hopefully, if everything goes right with the artist, after they sign it, you never have to look at the document again.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. And we do this on a piece-by-piece basis.
Yeah.
We have them sign an agreement for each individual commission.
Yeah.
I think we might consider doing, multiple if we knew we were going to commission. But I think we tend to commission one at a time just, right now, take pressure off of everyone. I think it's always nice that everyone, feels like, okay, if things start getting, weird in some way, I can walk away from this if, I don't have to do another one,
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, I don't know what that looks like in the future. It's also a matter of we want to, it'll be easier for us to make a fuller commitment, next rodeo when we have already done this once. But there's little details also, like
How much would we have to raise on the Kickstarter for you to be a rodeo clown for a day?
a whole day. That would actually be, as long as we shot it, I would be totally fine doing that.
We don't even have to have a Kickstarter?
Not that we don't have to have a Kickstarter, but I'm just saying it's a lower tier. It's like if we hit our halfway milestone, that could be rodeo clown for a day material. We get like halfway there, or how about this? No, the halfway, it's like we meet our goal plus 50% more. That's rodeo clown material right there, buddy.
Our goal plus 50% more?
Yeah.
So like if our goal is 10,000, if we raise 15,000,
Yes.
you'll spend a day as a rodeo clown?
Yes, but you have to come.
all I
You
have
and
to
Will
do-
have to come out and film.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't miss that for the world.
Yeah. I did have one more thing to add to that thought about doing multiple at a time, and this is something you should know, because as we go into talking about the briefs, is one reason it's hard to do the commissioning multiple at once is because depending on the complexity of each card, each image, like how many layers of action and detail are there, the artists start asking, that's what raises your price. We don't want to, I don't think we want to talk specific numbers here, but let's just say we've had prices double so far based on like the description we gave the artist, because what they thought was just going to be like a single item with a like colorful abstract background, we actually wanted it to be the relic in a space, and that space having details as well, and that can raise your price. Action set pieces, making sure things look like they're in motion also helps raise the price. But that's all the things you have to consider in writing the brief for the artist. And so why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about that, which is probably the funnest part of the process, and like the part of the process where you and I get to actually explore deeper our thoughts on like what the story of the overall game is.
Yeah. So before we do this, let me just kind of outline exactly the step-by-step to get to the brief, because I think people find this interesting. So we identify an artist, we send out the, initial, email asking if they're interested. They reply, we set up the interview call, we send them the agreement in advance. Then at that point, we're going to share with them also any card templating information, any specs that they need to know. And usually we'll try to connect them with our graphic designer so that they have a technical contact that they can communicate with directly. And then the idea is, hey, we're going to draft the brief. We talked about generally what we want to do. We're going to draft the brief. We'll send it to you. And once you receive the brief, they will quote us a price, because then they'll see exactly the amount of detail we want. And if everything is copacetic, we'll take the brief, we'll customize the agreement to be this specific piece. We'll attach the brief, and then we'll send it to them for signature. And then upon signature, we'll pay them based on whatever payment terms we've agreed to. So that gets us to the brief. That kind of shows the whole process, the lead up. So Joel, if you want to take it away on the brief.
Yeah, I would love to. The brief, like I said, it's my favorite part of the process. And I think it's, it is the shortest in the show notes. There's, I would say this is where you get to turn into the writer and the director of the art piece, because it's your vision and how you put it on the card that that determines what the artist is going to draw up and what's going to set them off in a direction. And we've had a few things that have worked. We've sent artists briefs that they didn't like. They took the overall vibe of what was going on, but then decided, hey, how about instead of that detail, let me show you this detail. And they would send us something in thumbnail, and that would get us going in a completely different direction. Sometimes the artist stuck to the brief completely, but like depicted it from a different angle than I was expecting. We can get into all of that, but the brief is both super important because it gets everybody on the same page and going in the same direction, but it's also like in movies, you often hear about that trope of like, oh, just throw the script away. It's like at this point, it's all about the drama. It's all about like what we're doing here now today, and that's kind of true. It's like, you want to be poetic. You want to look to tell a story, and you want to know what you're looking for in what direction you want to head in, but you don't want to be like super rigid, like it has to be this exactly. And you don't want to have like too crystal clear of a vision that you're trying to nail, leaving the artist no room for creativity. And you also don't want to not know what you want, because then once you don't know what you want, that's when, well, this sounds good and that also sounds good, but it could also be this, and then you're giving them very conflicting notes and direction.
100%. I think it's important for you to kind of have a general idea, and this is, ties back into how we have leveraged AI art during concepting in a way that has been beneficial to artists, and this was crystallized for us in our last call with an artist, and we asked about the art, and her comment was, I really like seeing the concept art, because a lot of times when I work with clients, they don't know how to even begin to describe what they want. They don't even know what they want. Mm-hmm. And that creates a lot of frustration. That generates a lot of additional cost. So being able to show up and say, hey, we've put some thought into this. This is generally what we want in terms of aesthetic and look, just allows the artist to proceed with a lot of confidence that they know, one, whether or not they're the right artist to do what you're asking them to do, and then two, to just generally understand what your taste is. And I think that's really, really important. We've had a tremendous amount of success with artists turning in art that we were very, very happy with, and very little disconnect. I mean, we'll go back and forth on details and getting things just right, but overall, no one has really just completely, been unable to get where we want to go within a reasonable review process.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty spot on. We haven't gotten too far into any particular image and having to make drastic changes. Little details like, oh, can we change the arm here? Can we maybe change up the color schemes? Which turns out changing the color in this day and age is not nearly as hard as it used to be, since all the colors are just on layers in Photoshop. You can just select the color layer and just start tweaking it. So it makes it much easier for us to get the correct colors. But
one thing I did want to add here real quick, and I think you'll agree with this, is during the interview process, you should talk about what makes for a good art brief, because different people want different things. Some people really want something that's, right down the line, an explanation of what the image is, and they don't need any other additional information that isn't, relevant to what we're seeing on the page. Whereas other people want all the backstory they can get. They want to know what the character was doing, years and years before, where they're going after, what they think about, everything you could imagine telling people within the context of a story. Some artists really want that information because they want to, I think, ensoul those characters. They want those characters to seem alive in their images.
Well, that's something that I come back to in considering the art briefs, and in that stage I have to reconcile in my own brain between making the brief and thinking of the story as a whole and then consolidating it to an image, is that we, at least right now, we do have plans to make a comic book in the future and hopefully beyond that for this story. But right now, every single story beat that is associated with a card has to be told in one image. You get one image on a card, at least last time I checked. If they come out if they come out with those holofoil, remember those cards, those promos that you could turn and it would change the image. If we could make a playing card game using those, I might consider what we could do with that. But you get one image, so there are things that we're stuffing details into these pieces of art that probably you're choosing an angle that will capture the entire scene. You're putting in images that probably wouldn't be in the if you had an entire page to detail out this space, this character's what they're doing, you would probably choose different images, close-ups, things like that. But you have to go for that wide shot. You have to try to fill it in with as much detail. So I often say it's like right now I have the animated version of the card in my head. I have the movie moment, but it's not like we have to consolidate it. We have to flatten it to one moment.
Yeah, 100%. You have to figure out what is essential and what will convey in that singular image. Singular, I'm using singular wrong there, but in that one image,
that one snapshot, if you will.
Yeah, the essence of what the players need to know or experience to fully enjoy the story and the game.
But and like you said, it's like, and that's why some artists want to know a little bit more, because like what in capturing this image, what the character was doing right before the image and what they're trying to reach might be something they can depict in the art itself, in that one image. They're very clever people, these artists. They know which angle is going to be the best to get you the most information. And they never fail to surprise me.
The last thing I just want to say on this topic is, remember, artists are collaborators, and you're going to get the most out of the process if you collaborate. Everyone who's been in the creative fields and has had a client view them as very little more than a puppet will understand that frustration. And I guarantee you, the quality of work you're going to get from an artist, if you try to put your hand on theirs and draw it and do every single detail exactly the way you have it in your brain, is going to be far worse than if you approach the person and say, hey, I want to partner with you. What do you think about this? What would you do? And give them the leeway to create. Because when creators can create versus just fabricate what's in your brain, they are going to blow you away far more often than when they're just mechanically reproducing what you want detail by detail.
Yeah, and you're not going to get the best of them if you do that. Now, this does give us to a point where there are certain gates that you get to where the artist gets to show you what they came up with, and you can, at that point, usually with little effort, start suggest a few changes and maybe meld it a little, make a little adjustments. Now, it's different for every artist, but I'll just lay them down. There's usually thumbnails or sketches, and that you would get that before they move on to inking or painting. So, Danny, is there anything in particular, like when you get those sketches or those thumbnails in, like what do you look at? What do you think? What are you looking for to make suggestions for changes versus what you think? Okay, we might have to let this cook and see where that goes.
So for thumbnails often for me, composition, framing, making sure that the major elements are present in the frame in a way that is properly focused for the card. Meaning, if you're showing a relic or depicting a relic, if the relic's off in the distance and not the center focus of the image, you're not on the right focus. So for thumbnails, it's really what's the right dynamic angle, is the right thing in focus, is just kind of blocking. Then when we get to the sketch phase, that's where you're looking for those little details that really are going to bring the idea alive come in. You're making sure that, we just went through Ruckus Bazaar, right, with one of the artists. And there was a lot of back and forth about what the right frame was because we hadn't really given enough thought to what we needed the card to communicate on the front end. And what we ended up landing on was we needed it to feel large and expansive, and we needed it to feel chaotic, busy, ruckus, right? And figuring out how to check all those boxes in a way. And the one thing I would also say you added to it, which I think was also essential, is what makes this our world versus just any run-of-the-mill world. There was one detail in an early sketch that you saw and you said, hey, this looks good on paper, but it just feels like it can be anyone's world. We've seen it a million times. How can we bring something to this image that really sells X Seekers of Fortune universe, not just a generic setting?
Exactly. Just to clarify for the audience, I think we're talking a little broad, but I mean, this is supposed to be like your classic, I guess, Arabian marketplace that you would see a la Aladdin or Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's been plenty of countless examples of it, and we do want to tap into that trope. The specific detail I saw was a snake charmer thing, a snake charmer playing a flute and the snake in front of him. I was like, yeah, that's like what you would expect if it was like the slice of life of our real world. But we always want to try to, like you said, change it up. So what we came to divulge this, I suggested, and I think it just sunk with us. I was like, what if it was kind of like there was people betting on a cockfight, but instead of cocks, it was like lizards fighting, iguanas. And I think that tickled your fancy, because it's like, it's not something you would see in our real world. I mean, if you know that it exists out there, please let us know.
Iguana-like.
Yeah, I think I suggested iguana-like or a dancing bear. You wanted both, and I think our artist was like, hold up. Like, I think for good reasons. Like, you already want this to be a wide shot. Like, how much details can we get in here? And that's where we're talking about pushback, and like, and this is where the process. Our artist did this in a thumbnail version, which is below sketching. It is like it's simple lines on paper, not with no shadows, no details. Just
Shapes.
blocking shapes, basically. Shapes that vaguely look like humans, or boxes, or, stored fronts and things like that. But, at first, he was like setting it like a bird's eye view, or not bird's eye view, street eye view. Like, I thought it looked like a street photo, was what I often refer to it as, street photography, because it was like at eye level. And the more that we thought about it, we wanted to create a sense of claustrophobia, and we wanted to see the big, large crowd. And we wanted there to be that vanishing point that if you look up like street markets online and look at the photography, it's often going to, the thing that is really cool is just seeing the crowd of people going off in infinity into the distance. So, that brought us to like, the note, like, we can't, if it's at eye level, you're not going to get that depth. So we needed to raise up the image, and he took that note really quickly. And that was basically it. Like, once we gave him that note, raise up the image, get that vanishing point, and we all had reference photos for him to look at, it locked in. And the next thing he turned in, we were just like, go for it. That's it.
It was a cool one too, because lizards fighting is cool.
Yeah, but he still told a little story in there. Like, look around the lizard fight. There's a few more details that you're going to see once you get that final image.
Yeah.
So that's more or less the thumbnail portion of it, and that's slash sketching. And sketching is a little bit more detail, some indication of where shadows are going to go. It's closer to the final art, but it's still not there. And these are points where if you have a note, you can make big changes quickly because they haven't put a lot of effort in. But when they move on to the next portion, which is like laying down ink, laying down shadows, and laying down color, however they approach that, whether it be comic book inking or painterly painting, this is when it's going to be a little harder to ask them to make changes. So
think about this as like you're building a house.
Yes.
And they've put up the frame, and they're like, hey, does this frame look okay? Not that it's so easy to change a frame of a house, but it's certainly a lot easier to change a frame of a house before you start putting up the drywall and painting everything. And, once you have moved on to the point where you're making the house livable, going back and being like, well, we need to change something structural it's going to be a huge overhaul, and it's going to be very expensive. So,
and I have heard people make those notes. Like, I've worked on some sets of some movies, more like web series, I should probably say, or, internet videos, things like that. Nothing with millions of dollars on the line, but I've still had people like, last minute have asked for major changes, and you're just like, I feel like we're just going to waste most of our day now. Like, what, are we actually going to shoot this thing, or are we just going to make it look good for shooting? Sometimes you just have to embrace, like, okay, we might have made a mistake, I didn't communicate, but we have to get the scene. And that's what I talked about, like, throwing away the script. Sometimes you have to throw away your preconceived notions and make use of what's there and make it the best it can be. Now that is, so I will say, because I don't think there's sometimes times when you know something subconsciously, but you haven't been cued in on it. And I think inking versus painting was one of those things for us. I think we probably would know that there's a difference between like ink coloring and painterly painting, but it is something that, you really have to be specific with artists, because those are the two major ways of getting your colors on paper or, on the art. And painterly looks so much different and has such a different approach. Like when you do the ink painting, or if you color with ink, the artist has to actually go through and do like very intricate line work, because like all the blacks have to be put down, all the shadows, and then they fill in the rest with the color. Versus like the painterly, it has much more, I don't know, it's very dreamlike, kind of blends together. And so they don't usually put down ink in that situation. They'll just paint over the sketch.
So this is where understanding the differences makes a lot of difference in the feedback process, because to your point, when you're doing the graphic novel style, the ink style, which some of the cards are, the Ruckus Bazaar, for instance, you see the details on the sketch before you go to inking. Mostly, you don't see shading and everything, but you see the major details. But with some of our other artists, when they get to the sketch part, there's still a lot of details that are going to come through the coloring and through the painting. We have, one artist in particular at the sketch phase. It's kind of like, okay, like we sort of know where we're going, but it's a little harder to give nuanced, feedback, because not everything is fully sketched out.
Yeah, and that makes things different for each artist, because we know with him, the way that he works, he's very, very clever. He works in a way where we can get up, he can say, oh, I think I'm finished. And he's worked on so many layers that we can say, okay, we do have some comments at this point. We do have some things to change. And he's receptive to those changes because he knows all the intricacies of how his piece seems to work. And he's able to, add in an element or like change up one of the elements. I remember one of the arts, like the characters in a pose like this. And like, I felt like there's something wrong with the pose. I couldn't nail it. And it took me a while looking at the pose, like 10 minutes, like staring at the piece, trying to figure out what would make this better. And I realized at the angle, the arm was a little long. And so we're at the final stages, final touches. And I'm like, hey, is there any chance we could just pull her arm in a little bit? It just looks a little funky that it looks so long. And once he did that, it changed everything just to click into place. But other artists kind of tell us like, okay, if this is the sketch, we're locked into this, like, so basically there are places where you can make changes and you're not going to be a complete jerk about it, but know how the artist works and, see how receptive they are to making changes like these. At what point will you kind of be dedicated and locked in?
That's why it's so important to talk about changes and review and process during the interview, is just understand where their head's at for feedback and how to deliver that feedback. And then through your very first trial that you do with them, you're both learning how to work together. But ultimately, it's super important to make sure that you have a clear idea of minimum viable product before you get started. Mm-hmm. Because when push comes to shove, if there are details that you're not getting and you've run out of budget on this picture, you need to know that at least those MVP boxes are checked.
Yeah, I know, and I'm sure that if we could pay our artists even more, we could probably get, who knows how far these folks can go. They're so talented, but you are paying for their hours. And, you have to make sure that they hit the details they needed to. Like if a background element is, a little undercooked, that's fine if they used their time wisely and got those foreground elements done. Like you said, MVP. You need to know, like, what are people going to see first when they look at this card, and what are they going to fall in love with?
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, Danny, do you want to go through some of these key takeaways?
Sure.
For this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So the key takeaways here. Number one, shouldn't be a surprise. Artists are awesome. They deserve to be paid. Society needs them. We need them. We need to support them. So if you're in a position to support artists, please do so. Second, make sure that there's a clear agreement in place in writing that outlines your rights and needs and their rights and needs, and everything is agreed to in advance, and there's no ambiguity. Make sure you are you're abiding by that agreement and conducting yourself with integrity. Have an idea of what you want in advance, whether that's doing concept art or just spending a lot of time reflecting on it. It's important to go in and respect the artist's time, respect your budget, and do the homework beforehand, so you're not just spending money to figure out what you thought, or thinking. And then be prepared to be surprised. These artists are going to bring something to the table that is different than what you were expecting in some way, in some shape or form. And it's probably going to be awesome if you're open-minded, if you're receptive. Don't get tunnel vision. Don't get locked into, it has to be this way. It has to be this way. Your budget will be happier for it. Your collaborators will be happier for it, and your product will be fine. Just keep track of what MVP is. Make sure you protect MVP, and be open to what an artist has to bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't really good sum up right there, Danny. So, I hope that this has helped you work with artists. I hope you can learn something from this, and whether it be an album cover, a book cover, or your own trading card game, we really hope that you could learn something from this walkthrough of the artist process. So, that was this week's episode, but next week's episode is going to be pretty fun because we're going to have another guest on. Let me make sure I'm saying this right, Danny. Bryant plus Polanco. Is it Polanco?
It is Brian Polanco.
Bryant Polanco. Let me back it up.
The Crown Prince.
The Crown. All right. So on next week's episode, we're going to have a special guest. His name is Brian Polanco, but he would like to be introduced as that darn Joker.
The darn Joker.
That dang Joker.
He says we have to introduce him as the Joker. I am 100% supportive of that.
He's a menace to society, Danny. That Joker. He just throws chaos into the works, and I will not stand for it. But Brian is actually going to be here for a pretty structured conversation about the TCG space, and he's going to clue us into some of these hot new trading card games that have been coming out on Kickstarter. So we're going to get a nice little overview of, like I said, contemporary TCGs. So tune in next week for that. And as always, we have to ask you, please subscribe to our channel and ring that darned bell to get the next pod when it is hot and ready, right off the oven, right out of the kitchen. Also, like this episode. I'm sure we said something you liked during this episode. Would you say so, Danny?
Probably not, but you never know.
I think we did. I think we did a bang up job. I think we deserve a simple click of the like button.
Leave a comment. Let us know. We want to know what to do more of, what to do less of.
Yeah. If you have any questions about what you heard in this episode, leave a comment down below and we will answer those questions in a future episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we're about to get out of here, I thought, but then I scroll down the show notes and I'm reminded it's time for something random.
Yes, it is time for something random. And I think I have to ask Will to cue a little intermission music so that we can prepare, because I have asked you to prepare for some things. And here's the fun part of having a podcast. You can ask your co-host to spend money on things, to do things without much explanation, and they'll do it. And then it can have absolutely nothing to do with what you're planning to do because they want to have a good show. So let's go to the break, and we'll come back.
All right, Will, just in case something awful happens here in the something random section, let me go ahead and read off that the theme music is by James Hilden. Thank you, James. And this episode was produced and edited by William Wymore. Wish me luck.
All right. So, as you know, we do Game of the Week quite often. Yes. I was intending to do it all the time, but some feedback is that people love random things and miss something random. So we're going to infuse a little bit more of the random in the week to week. So
is it always going to be so costly? You know how much ice is going for these days, Danny?
This is going to be the most affordable of our future something randoms.
All right. Well, I'm packing the company card with me next time.
All right. So I'm somebody who enjoys a good beverage, and I do from time to time enjoy soda. Sometimes you want something that's a little more refreshing than a soda and a little healthier than a soda.
Okay.
But at least delicious. So I thought I would show you what I've been drinking lately and get your feedback.
Okay.
It's very simple.
Let me be your model. Which one should I show off first?
All right. So let's get your cup going with your ice.
So hopefully at this wider angle you can see here I got a cup and I've got ice. Danny asked for them.
Do you have a cuddle mug?
Yes, long story, but yeah, my an ex-girlfriend made this for me based on my logo design for Cuddle, and we're going to be talking more about Cuddle here real soon, maybe in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. We'll let you all know about Cuddle. But you asked for fancy ice, so I got these cubed ices here.
Yep, $500 worth of ice.
I'm assuming you want me to do that.
Yep.
Okay, now what?
All right. I've already got ice in my cup, so I'm not going to do it. Next, get your Simply Lemonade.
Okay.
And what
I went with the HEB brand, also very comparable. If you have HEBs near you,
I would say so.
Yes.
I would say so. Simply, you can tell how much I've been doing this based on how much I have left.
How much am I pouring in, Danny? Out of this cup, how full?
I would say go ahead and cut and do it about a third full.
Okay. You know, I used to be what they sometimes call pretentiously a mixologist or a bartender.
You know what?
So I'm
somewhere between a quarter and a third.
Okay.
Right about there. That's plenty.
Yes.
And you can adjust this based on how sweet you like something. Some people like beverages to be more on the sweet side. I tend to just like my beverages to be a little sweet and a little tart.
Well, I'll tell you this right now, looking at the sugar contents on this lemonade, you're definitely going to want to make it a little bit less lemonade because this thing is packed full of sugar. That's 30 grams. I think that's more than, or 28 grams. I think that's more than most soda pops.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is why you want to go a little less. I would say a little less than what Joel has in there. I would say that's closer to half. I would say between a third and a quarter is kind of what you're going.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you might. Why don't you go ahead and just take a sip off the lemonade just to kind of get the. Yep. Keep on sucking. That's good. Yeah, a little more.
Okay.
Yeah. Almost there. This might be my favorite game of the week. There you go.
That has to be it. Okay, cool. All right.
All right.
And
so
then we got
just top it off with
the
Topo Chico.
Austin's favorite beverage, Topo Chico. Trust me, as a former mixologist, I can tell you what, that people love this stuff.
Why did you get fired from your mixologist job?
There was this world-ending virus going around, and it caused my theater, the movie theater I was a bartender at, to close. And you know what? By the time they opened back up, I didn't want them anymore. I was very content listening to podcasts on the road, driving for Domino's.
Now stir that up really nice. Okay. And I've been...
Wait. Proper stirring technique if I can.
What makes for a proper stirring technique?
You're supposed to, because as a bartender you do it so frequently, you have to do it. They want you to do it with the least amount of movement, so as to preserve your wrist. So you're actually just barely pushing. It's more like you're pushing the stirring implement across. So it's hard to explain, but it's like you're definitely not doing this with your forearm. You're just in the wrist, kind of twirling.
For those listening and can't see, Winston has poked his head in to see what Joel thinks of his beverage.
Hey,
right.
Buddy, you want to say a sip? Come on over. Okay, is this so? Danny, this is the Danny special. What do you call it?
This is it. This is very simple, but this is what I've been drinking. It's quite refreshing. Cheers.
You know, I complained about the sweetness of the lemonade, but I think I might have sucked too much of the Simply off at first. It's really good, but I wouldn't mind it just being a tad bit sweeter.
Well, that's the beauty of being able to pour more lemonade into your cup.
Well, let's see. Well, here, let me take another sip first. So this reminds me a lot of, I don't think it's exactly that, but this reminds me a lot of a Tom Collins. So, this would be obviously the virgin version of it, because the Tom Collins, I think, would normally have gin or whiskey.
I love virgin drinks. I'm like the freak who's like, can I have this without alcohol? I'll go to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico where they just try to feed you alcohol day to night.
Yeah.
And
you mean heaven.
And I'll be like, hey, can I have this pink drink but without alcohol? And they're like, why? I drink Bloody Mary mix.
I do enjoy a virgin Bloody Mary. That was my secret pleasure of opening up the bar on Sunday mornings, was I would pour myself some of the Bloody Mary mix, that would soon be utilized. So good.
I have a really good idea for a future episode. But it's going to require me letting you know in advance. So
okay,
we'll do it. We'll make it happen. Perhaps I should just go ahead and lay down the gauntlet right now.
Well, we've talked about a lot of future episodes in this episode, so why not?
So how about this? For a future something random, let's say the next episode that it is just you and I, no guest.
Okay.
I challenge you to a Bloody Mary duel.
Go on.
So on camera, we will both make Bloody Marys, and the person who has the most extravagant Bloody Mary wins.
That's maybe not next episode. Let Papa have a few paychecks in his bank account, but I was already nervous enough doing anything with liquids in my computer space, like that wasn't just like bringing it over with like a sippy cup. I'm a messy spill.
You drink
boy.
out of a sippy cup? You have one?
It's more like just those road containers for my coffee, but sometimes I'll have those. Sorry, I just got a message. Sometimes I'll when I want to be extra careful, I might put my coffee into a to-go thermostat. So if I turn it over, it's not going to get everywhere.
To-go thermostat? That's one way
what?
to make sure your beverage is the right temperature.
This is what it's all about. Drinks with the boys.
Drinks with the boys.
Just on the pod. Oh yeah.
On the
Put a top
pod,
off.
enjoying beverages, challenging
So-
each other to Bloody Mary duels.
Bloody Mary duel is. Well, see, for me, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about the garnishes on top.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I'm thinking the mix itself.
Well, yeah, that matters too.
Yeah, but the thing is like you're not going to get like we have to go for the visual gag of it all because you're not going to be able to drink unless we're talking like the next time we're both in town. You're not going to be able to drink my mix, and my mix, if I kind of rip off one of the recipes from my old work, was pretty darn good. It was very spicy, but in like not a vinegar spice way. That's like one of my things with hot sauces. I can handle spice, but I'm much more of a pepper person, like deep peppery spice. Like I'm not a huge like sauce fan because most sauces feel like they're like vinegar based.
You don't like sauces in general? Or just hot sauces?
I'd say the type of hot sauces that you use, like hot sauces, that style, like things that you dab on, I'm not a huge fan of. I like, like salsas.
We should do our own hot ones.
I really would. I don't.
From 1 to 10, like start mild, get spicy. I'll do 1 through 5. You do 5 through 10.
I'll have to check with the doctor first. If you, as the audience might have been following, I've had an major intestinal problem that I fixed with surgery, but I still don't know what the limitations are. And people often say after post hot ones is like just devastating for their systems.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think I could do that. You know what? You want to hear something crazy before we get off to something random? I'll just say one random.
Yeah, one random thing. I said, what's stopping you?
There was a really long TikTok that I really liked. I wish I could plug this person. I have no clue who it was.
Yeah.
I do think I followed them. This person made hot sauce out of, guess what ingredient? It's an ingredient you will never guess. I'll give you 500 guesses. You'll never get it. But give me one.
I'm just going to say, I mean, it's like a few things came to mind instantly, but I realized that the common denominator about all of them was sugar. So I'm going to say they made hot sauce out of sugar.
Wrong. Latex gloves.
Yeah, you're right. I would have never gone to that because I was thinking about food, Danny. I was thinking about something that's meant to be ingested.
I think they were latex gloves. They were definitely like, they might have been a different kind of glove that you wear. But he cut them up and like did some sort of chemical reaction to extract something from it to make his own capsaicin molecule. So he like molecularly crafted the molecule that we perceive spice from or experience spice from. I don't know. I'm saying this in like the least scientific way possible. But I just sat there enthralled as he turned a bunch of gloves into a hot sauce. Now, granted, there were other things involved, right? Like key. But what there wasn't pepper. What the spice was from the gloves. Well, the gloves plus some other stuff. But it was all like,
I'm upset, Danny. You've upset
chemistry
me.
Stuff.
Yes, I get it. I'm sure if I watched it, I would be fascinated. But the classic trope of a science fiction film is like, have we gone too far? Have we done the work that was meant for God? And that feels like my reaction to hearing this is okay. Yeah, don't. We just because we could doesn't mean we should.
This draws the line for you. It's
Yeah.
not anything that Genghis Khan did. It's the latex glove hot sauce.
Hey, sometimes to make an omelet you have to break a few eggs, but no god said that you need latex gloves to become hot sauce.
That was an interesting quote. Anyway, we'll settle this matter with our Bloody Mary duel here in a couple episodes.
Yeah. All right, sir. Well, I guess with that, we should probably wrap up the show. Danny, do you have anything else to add before we go?
No, I mean, this was a great final show, and yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Danny, my co-host, and I have been Joel, reminding you that you must start somewhere. So why not here?
Give us a couple non-alcoholic drinks, and all the wheels just come right off.